you're given all three sides are the same, you can assume all three angles are the same. So really, just this backside is a lot of solving for x, and it's just understanding the properties of these triangles. So this triangle we're given, we know it's equiangular. We can assume it is equilateral. So the only statement I have to make here is that all three sides are the same, meaning x has to be 31 if it's equilateral. All sides are the same measure. For example 3, we are combining our knowledge of isosceles and equilateral triangles. So for example 3, it's understanding that with this shape, there's two triangles. There's an equilateral and an isosceles triangle. Now, the thing we have to remember is that with an equilateral triangle, it's also equiangular. And we've got to remember that if all three angles are the same measure, use a better color here. If all three angles are the same measure in a triangle, each angle is 60 degrees. And the reason being is the interior angles of a triangle add to equal 180. You divide that equally between three angles, that means each one is 60. That means this is 60, 60, 60. Okay? And then also, using that knowledge, that this being a right angle, right here, I could find the other angle between these two. The other angle is 90 minus 60, which is 30. So that angle is 30. Now, if this angle is 30, knowing that this triangle is isosceles, I could do 180 minus 30 is 150, and that 150 has to be divided equally between these two angles. So that means it's 75 degrees, making y equal to 75 degrees. So that one takes some critical thinking. The thing we have to remember is that in an equilateral triangle, all three angles are always 60 degrees in an equilateral triangle. I use that knowledge to find this angle being 30, and use my knowledge of isosceles triangles to subtract 30 from 180 and divide it by 2. So I know y is 75. The other thing I know is that the side that contains x is congruent to the side that contains this y minus 25. So the equation I can set up is x equals y minus 25, but I know y is 75. So x is whatever 75 minus 25 is, making x 50. And then I know both values of the variables. So this is an in-depth problem. This is a good critical thinking problem. So what I want you to do next is I want you to work through the guided practice on your own. I want you to take your time. I want you to pause the video, and I want you to check your answers with me and my explanation, because we don't have as much pencil and paper practice anymore. More of it's online. So this is your best chance to get some pencil to paper and work through some problems by writing them out. Okay, so for the guided practice, in number 1, I can assume all three angles of this triangle are congruent because, I'll use a pen actually there, all three sides are congruent. So if all three sides are congruent, all three angles are congruent. If all three angles are congruent, they are all 160. That's that same idea. 180 divided equally between three angles is 60 degrees. So I set 2x equal to 60. I solve for x. For the last guided practice, got to use some knowledge here. This triangle is isosceles by these double markings, meaning that these two angles here, these two base angles, are congruent. So I find those angles by subtracting 40 from 180 and dividing it equally between the two angles, meaning that x is 70. I set up my equation substituting 70 for x and then solving. So you've got to use some previous knowledge to set up the equation and to solve it. So your next step in the lesson is to do the checkpoint If you feel like you need some practice, you are free to do those pencil and paper practices. But what goes in the gradebook is that quizzes link, okay? That's what I'm going to use as your practice to grade you, all right? I've had some issues with people submitting images of things, so I figure the quizzes is the easiest way. So make sure you're using your name on those and submitting those so that I can at least see that you did them. Don't worry if you don't do well. If you need further practice, that's why I do the pencil and paper one.